And good evening, my lovelies, and welcome to Monday. It's time to do the thing and talk about stuff. That's what we do. Welcome on and welcome all to the Monday writing stream, the informal Monday writing stream. But there we go. How are we all doing? Have we survived Monday? That's the most important thing. We got to get that out of the way first. You know, Monday's a tough day, isn't it? It's just hard work. It's like, why do Mondays evenings exist? It shouldn't be allowed. Mondays are just bad. But there we go. I've got my cup of tea. Actually, I think it's my Saturn. Is it Saturn? Saturn is supposedly less dense than water. So the idea being that you had a sufficiently large cup of tea, you could float the entire planet Saturn in said cup of tea. But obviously that's only density on average. There would be some minor technical problems in floating Saturn in a cup of tea, but there we go. But there we are. Never mind. There we go. Right, let's do the thing because we've got to think. You've all been chatting. You've all been chatting about Starfield, haven't you? Completely off topic for this stream, but never mind. We can talk about Starfield. Right, let's go for the list. Shiny Red Flag is here, right in first place. Yay! Well done, Shiny Red Flag. Wintermute GB is here. Of course he is. Commander J9 here. There's the Harkonnens are here. Radio Racket Pete SB is here. Dio977 is here. Glenn is here. Commander Terra Firma. Good to see you, Commander Glenn. That's always good. The Arrakis is here, fighting off the invasion of Harkonnens, etc., etc., etc. Shadow Wyvern is here, Commander Dustdawn is here, the Haunted Loaf. You're going to have to explain that one to me one day. Haunted Loaf, I like that. But anyway, welcome. Lucky Luigi is here as well. Commander Blue is here. Go down the list. DJ Scooby is here as well. There we go. We've been talking about the writing in Starfield, have we? Have we? Okay, right. The writing is. Well, it does look exciting, doesn't it? Oh, Gigi's here as well. Hello, Gigi. It does look exciting. Lots of boxes ticked, right? So let's do 5 minutes on Starfield and we can get it out the way, can't we? Because I must admit I don't know much about Bethesda. I don't think I've played any of their games before. I've heard a few bits and pieces that people have been telling me off for being enthusiastic about something, but people always do that. Like, ignore them. Let's be enthusiastic about something. Well, I mean, first things first. More space games. I mean, that's good, right? Yeah, more space games is always good. It kind of did look a little bit No Man's Sky-ish to me, but kind of with slightly more gritty, modern-y, kind of high sci-fi kind of graphics. I understand it's a single-player game, so it's not going to have multiplayer, which actually in some ways might be a good thing in terms of actual more content in the actual game. Although multiplayer is obviously good fun, I enjoy multiplayer in some of the other games, but so that's how it kind of looks. But the stuff that we did see looked good. I think having hundreds of planets to explore. Is there much detail on the planets? Can you go anywhere on the planets? Can we land anywhere? Is there a flight model? All those kind of questions need to be answered every time I do it. But so I don't know. It definitely looks exciting. It's definitely going to be one to watch. I don't think we know enough about it to really make a judgment call. I saw Obsidian Ant has put up a YouTube video, which, and because Obsidian Ant is Obsidian Ant, thousands of people have already watched it, and he's basically said that's it. That's the end of all space games. Starfield's coming out, and I was like. Not quite sure we've got enough information to say that, but let's fingers crossed. Let's see how good it is. So Microsoft has bought them. Okay, so it's a sort of effectively it's a Microsoft product but made by Bethesda Studios. It'll be interesting to see. I think one big observation, obviously from all of us now, we talked on all the other streams about the appalling launch of No Man's Sky, the fact that Star Citizen is still in alpha after 10 years, and the less said about Elite Dangerous, the better. In terms of what happened with Odyssey, so we know there's problems. It seems that making space game is hard, right? Space games is hard. The fact that another space game is coming along is a good thing, but let's not get too enthusiastic before it actually comes out. I think that's got to be the rule, hasn't it? It's got to be released. It's got to be full release. And maybe critically reviewed a little bit before I'm going to even start thinking about diving into it. So we'll see. They said you could land on every planet. Okay, that's good. And you could land anywhere. I wonder if that's automated landing or whether we can actually fly down. Is there going to be HOTAS support? Yeah, all those questions all need answering, right? Get in early and write a novel for them. I think that might be a bit late, actually. Is it coming out next year? I don't think I could write a novel in time. They'd have to come along. It did look good, though. It did look good. If you could marry up some of the best, I think this is the thing, isn't it? This is the danger of the hype train, right? Is we kind of look at this newcomer and go, well, what are the best bits of Elite? Well, lots of exploration content, a huge realistic galaxy. Well, there's a bit of that in Starfield. It seems to be set in the real universe, so. Tick box there, a bit of exploration. We can interact with the environment. We saw the sort of mining stuff, chipping off rocks and things, kind of No Man's Sky. So that's good. You can actually interact with the environment. It's not just a static environment. There's a bit of pew in there as well. That's good. There's a bit of exploration there. That's good. Maybe some other bits and pieces. There's a story. Yay! Yeah, there's some lore. All boxes being ticked. This is really, really good. But what's it going to be like? Who knows? I'm. Let's not get aboard the hype train right now. It's exciting. It's definitely one to watch. Let's keep an eye on it. Is it going to replace all other space games? I would have thought it'd be very unlikely it's going to do that. But comparing things with other space games is inevitable. I was quite excited about it. What's good is competition is good. Okay, competition is good because it forces other people, other organisations to go, oh, right, there's somebody else here now, then we better up our game. So that can only be a good thing for the entire space game industry, if such a thing exists. I think so. Yeah. Cautiously excited. I think is my kind of take on it. It did look good, and it's nice to see another space game coming. And and I think customizable spaceships. That sounds quite intriguing, doesn't it? So that sounds quite good fun. That's more like kind of Space Engineers, maybe. So it does feel like Bethesda's kind of gone, right, Elite Dangerous, okay, it's a realistic galaxy, we'll have that. Customizable spaceship, space engine, yeah, we'll have that. Interactable environment where you can kind of poke things and prod things. No Man's Sky, well, we'll take that. Cool, funky spaceships and some, some realistic looking environments that look cool. Star Citizen, okay, we'll get a picture of that as well. It kind of feels like they've grabbed all this sort of stuff and go, there's the perfect space game. We'll see. We will see. We will see what comes out. So I think it's going to be quite fun. Yeah. I'm excited. I'm not kind of like, hey, I've got to buy it now. Can't wait until it comes out. No, I think it'll be, it's something to look forward to for next year, isn't it? We'll have to wait and see. If it comes out for consoles as well, that would be quite good fun. I think that's my view. Not sure if that's worth a video or anything, but there we go. That's kind of my view on it. But anyway, we're not here to talk about space games, at least not directly. We are here to talk about that thing, that writing thing. Tonight's topic is all about. It's kind of continuing in my theme of things to do and things to not do when you're writing, which is all about description. So when you're writing a novel. You need to set the scene. Okay, you need to build a place. We've talked about world building a little bit. We'll do a bit more about that in a future stream. You talk about setting the environment, setting the tone of the place, and all those kind of things. And you have to do that in a novel because you can't just pick up a novel and then Bob says, "Hello, right, let's go." And Jane says, "Okay, where are we going?" "Oh, over there," says Bob. "Excellent," says Jane. "Right, after you then. Where are these characters?" "Okay. Are they in a spaceship? Are they in an ocean liner? Are they in a car? Are they out for a walk? Where are they?" All right. So description is important. Okay. There's no argument about that. If you don't have enough, or you don't have any, then the novel doesn't make any sense. Okay. So if you just have dialogue, it doesn't make sense. You've got to provide some. Okay, you've got to provide some. You've got to put in a basic environment whereby the reader, i.e. the person who ideally you want to sell your book to ultimately, is going, yeah, okay, I'm getting a sense of where I am. I'm in a railway carriage, or I'm on on an airplane, or wherever it is that happens to be. We are there. So if you don't put any in, your readers are going to just go, this is crazy. Okay, so you've got to have some description. All right, description is important. What do you put in a description? Well, what can you see is probably the easiest one. Okay, so if you're in a railway carriage, in a contemporary novel, you can say it's a railway carriage because everyone knows what a railway carriage is, right? That can also give an indication of time. Depending on the type of book you're writing, it might not be clear as to whether or not which period you're in. If you're contemporary or you're in the past. Now, if you're in the future, it gets a bit more tricky. So it gets a little bit more tricky for sci-fi writers, because if you're on the inside of a spaceship, okay. We all know what a spaceship is in principle, right? I'd be a bit disappointed on this stream if people didn't know what a spaceship was. Okay, but what kind of spaceship is it? Okay, that's quite important. Is it? Are we talking? What kind of book is this? Is it realistic, hard science fiction? Is it fantasy science fiction? Is it space opera? Are we talking warp drive, hyperspace? Rockets? What are we talking about? So description is a big red one. That's right. There we go. A big red rocket. That'll do. That's enough description for DJ Scribby's book. What kind of rocket is it? It's a red one. That helps set the scene. Now, science fiction you have to put a bit more description in. It's inevitable, okay, because otherwise, okay, I know what the spaceship is notionally, yeah, but is it a big spaceship? Is it a small spaceship? Is it rocket powered? Is it warp drive? All sorts of things like that. So the trick is, how do you whack the description in? Now, in the olden days, back in the day, with the high masters of science fiction. So I'm thinking of people like Asimov and Clarke and Heinlein, all that kind of type. Okay, a few pages of description was absolutely fine back then. Okay, a few pages of description. If you read some old science fiction, in fact, you can sometimes have entire chapters of description, pretty much only scene setting and stuff. Describing this and describing that. Now, strictly speaking, there's nothing wrong with that. Okay, but it does tend to, and this is again another one of those stylistic things that's changed over time. Is it tends to be a bit frowned upon nowadays. It's like, okay, well, the problem you have is that if you have a lengthy description of something, like let's say it's a spaceship or a drive component or a weapon or whatever it happens to be, it's I'm sorry to say, it's quite boring, right? And I was going to come to that Wintermute. Wintermute's gone and stolen my thunder. Look, I've got my copy of Dune here, ready to go, and he's already stolen my thunder. Stop it. So you can you can put too much description, and it can be incredibly boring. Because do you really need to know, as the novel starts, right? Do you need to know about the history of the longevity and the many cycles of the spaceship improvement quest for over the last 30 decades in your imaginary environment? It can be incredibly boring. So reading this, thinking, okay, do I need to know this stuff about the through space drive or whatever it happens to be that you've invented? It almost always is inevitably boring. Now, it is something that if your set of books becomes wildly successful, okay, descriptions of the technology can be poured over and people will dissect them on wiki pages and all that sort of stuff. That can happen, but I wouldn't recommend putting it in early on. Okay, it could be fodder for an appendix. Who doesn't like an appendix? Because most people can avoid the appendix if they're not interested. But if you're really interested in the appendix, hands up, anybody in the chat who loves the appendices in Lord of the Rings. I love the appendices in Lord of the Rings. That's because I'm already sold into the book. Okay, so having read Lord of the Rings, it's like, I just need a little bit more detail. Okay, need to be, appendices are good for that sort of stuff. So if you want to write a detailed description or history of the hypothetical warp drive thingamajig that you've invented for your spaceships, an appendix is a perfect place to put it. Okay, but don't put it in chapter 1 for God's sake. All right. Because everyone will go, really? The reason I'm saying that is partly they're boring, okay, until you're sold on the book. Okay, then they become really interesting. It's quite, there's a flip over. Appendices are utterly boring unless you're bought into the thing, and then they become suddenly really interesting. Put them in the back, okay, put them in the back. Why are they boring? They're boring because they don't matter at that point in time, okay? Because whatever is going to happen to your spaceship and your crew or your weapon or whatever it is that you're describing won't happen until you finish the description, okay? And the reader knows that, okay? So they're kind of looking at this massive, great long paragraphs of stuff that you've written about your amazing thing, and they're going, when's the story going to start? And that's what they're really looking for. So if there's a point to something, yes. If it's just, okay, this is scene setting and I'm explaining the amazingness of my super duper warp drive, then if there's a point coming up, and it's got to come up fairly soon, okay, then maybe you can get away with it. If there is no point to it other than this is just how it works, that's the wrong place for it. Okay, so you don't want that up front. Now, Wintermute has already it's picked up by thing now. Here's a good example of actually a book that doesn't have any almost no description in it at all for kind of things that you would expect there to be description of. So Dune, as you've probably seen recently as a film, and you may have, if you're the older amongst us, you may have seen it as a TV or made for film kind of TV show in the is it the 80s or the 70s? I can't remember. I think it was the early 80s. Obviously when they're turned into TV shows and films, there has to be something on the screen to look at. Okay, was it the 90s? It can't be that late. No. When was the Dune film? The original Dune film, was it? No, it can't be the 90s. Yeah, David Lynch film in the 80s. There we go. 90s for the TV show. Right, okay. Let's go. So that was what I was talking about. It wasn't made for TV. Sorry. Okay, that's my mistake. So 84 for the original film. Right, sorry. I don't think I've watched the TV version. So anyway, another thing to add to the list of things that I haven't got time to go and do. So let's think about the film. There's this a spacefaring culture. Okay. Has to somehow get from one planet to another. Okay. Presumably using spaceships, and they kind of referred to offhand in the book. Now, in Dune, the process of people getting from one planet to another, which you kind of generally would think about was a fairly big staple of a space story, hardly mentioned. Okay, there's no detail whatsoever in Dune, in the book. Of how the spaceships work at all, other than the spice allows the navigators to fold space, and that's about all you get. Is it technological? How does it work? No idea what the spaceships look like. Nope. What does it feel like to go through space between what? No idea. Okay, it's not there. All right, it's not in the book. Frank Herbert just. Yeah, as he wrote Dune, clearly considered that wasn't important to the story he was telling. So there's nothing there to work off. You literally go, when you're reading this, you go from one planet to the next with barely a paragraph. Whereas, had I been writing Dune, I would have probably put in something about the spaceships and the process of getting from one place to another, just because it would feel to me like there was, that was an important part of the thing. But maybe it's not. Okay, so it's a book. It's a book. When was it written? Quite a while ago, actually. Now, isn't it? What does it say? Can't. There we go. 1965. Okay, someone's looking for that. So 1965, right? It's a political story. That's essentially what it is, and it's not explained how it works, and that kind of makes it, you can imagine anything you like in that sort of space, and then your imagination hopefully fills in the blanks. Now that's quite an extreme example. It's quite unusual for an author of a science fiction novel not to provide any kind of thing to hook off. But basically, he just wanted to cut to the chase because the story was about people, and the story was about politics, and the story was about adversity and things like that happening on the planet itself. So but it's interesting when you obviously come to make a TV adaptation or a film adaptation, you have to put something in there because how do the spaceship work? That's a choice that you kind of make. Now that personally, I wouldn't write like that because the space travel. To me is I want to shape that a little bit, but if you as the author, and Frank Herbert in fact obviously did this, don't consider that to be an essential part of the story. It doesn't matter how they get there, and the reader's obviously got to fill in all the blanks. Okay, in terms of that stuff. In the films when Arrakis is attacked by the Harkonnens, those dastardly Harkonnens who are in the Jat and the Arrakis. There is a bit of pew pew. There's some explosions going off and stuff. Okay, and things get blown up. Because there has to be something in the film to kind of show that there's actually a war going on. Again, in the book, it's just the aftermath is talked about. The actual scene of the fighting. There isn't a scene for the fighting. It's just the aftermath of it and the prelude to it, which. came as a bit of a surprise because I'd read it years and years ago and I'd forgotten about it. And I read it again relatively recently prior to going to see the new film to just remind myself. And I was surprised by how much, if you like, isn't in the story. Scenes that I personally, as an author, would have written. And maybe that's why I'm not famous like Frank Herbert. I don't know. It's a stylistic choice. You certainly, as a writer, need to play with the how much do I put in, how much do I leave out to allow the reader to use their own imagination. Right? If you put in too much description, there's nothing left for the reader to do. So I would generally, write something that let's talk about. I don't know. Let's talk about a spacesuit. Okay. So a spacesuit might be quite a mundane item for the most part, but if you want to get across the impression that the spacesuit itself is a highly sophisticated spacesuit and not kind of a clumsy mechanical thing that you might have today, you might chuck in a description, something along the lines of she tapped the spacesuit activation tab and felt a moment of disorientation as the protective skin enveloped her and shielded her from the vacuum. That gives you, I don't need to describe exactly how it works, I don't need to describe exactly what it's doing, but it gives you, the reader, the impression that's not a normal spacesuit, i.e. a great big clunky piece of equipment. That's some sort of device that shields you and covers you against, and protects you against the radiation and the vacuum of space, which is clearly a lot more high tech than the sort of spacesuits that we would have, let's say, on the space station, right? So you can do things like that to kind of give your reader that's a bit more high tech than we're normally. That sort of sets the technical tone. I don't know to explain how that works. I don't even know how it works. Okay, I've just made that up on the spot. But you know what I mean. It allows the reader to go, aha, okay. Okay, I kind of get what's happening here, and it's a device that somehow sort of. That's kind of how they'll take a good example in Elite, for example, with Robert Holstock. That's how he did the Remlock mask. Okay, so the Remlock mask in the original lore. So let's go back to the original lore, not what Elite Dangerous did with it. In the original lore, the Remlock mask was a mask that you clipped over your face. That could, in the event of being chucked into a depressurized environment, spread some sort of cocoon over your entire body, okay? And it would do that, automatically. It was like a life preserver, effectively, but for space. That's basically what it is. So that was the original Remlock from Elite, and Wintermute and Mad Monk stuff. The still suit in Dune is a similar kind of thing. How does it work? Well, it basically surrounds you and stops your body fluid from evaporating away in the harsh environment of Arrakis. 99.9% effective or something like that. I can't remember what the numbers were. And how does that work? It doesn't matter. Okay, it works. That's what it does. Okay, it's a suit that covers you and allows you to not lose any moisture. Which is clever stuff. Okay, it's clever, a bit like cider. But that's enough description for your brain. If you're a good reader, be a good reader. For your brain to go, okay, so it's like a suit, and it's kind of somehow it's absorbing this, and somehow it's doing that, it's protecting this, and transferring that. I wonder how that works. It's clever stuff, and your brain's already filling in the gaps. That's good description. Okay, so it's not overdone. You don't need to explain that it's got microprocessing pumps and heat exchangers and microfilament filtering capsules or whatever. That's too much. Okay, just explain roughly what it does and what its limitations are, perhaps. And Glenn, you're quite right there. The ornithopters. I mean, it just mentions ornithopters. Now, ornithopters is a very generic term. Okay, it's basically a machine that flies with wings. Is pretty much what an ornithopter is. Now, that's slightly distinct from a helicopter, but not all that distinct. So in the recent film, they've made the ornithopters like sort of mechanized dragonflies, which is very cool. Looks great. Is that what Frank Herbert imagined? Probably not. Is it what some of us imagined? Quite possibly, yes. So all that sort of stuff is quite interesting. So that kind of puts some description in, but leave most of it to the leave most of it to the reader's imagination is a good thing. The other thing I thought the movie of Dune did particularly well is to kind of de-emphasize the technology. Okay, so whereas a lot of science fiction is about the high-tech stuff, okay, it's about the hollow screens, and it's about the lasers and the weapons and the shields and the engines and all the stuff that makes spaceships, right? Dune was very much not that. Okay, the technology was de-emphasized. It wasn't really important to the story, and that's a it's a stylistic choice depending on the thing that you're telling. In the stuff that I'm doing at the moment, for example, technology is important, but it's not the most important thing. It's still a story about people, but the technology does have limitations and things that you have to consider, which are important parts of the storytelling thing. So those sort of things can be important. And your readers do need to understand how that works. So I've actually already swapped 2 of my chapters around because I've run into this exact problem writing my latest science fiction novel, is that what I did have as chapter 1 actually was a bit too boring for chapter 1, I decided. So I've moved it to chapter 2 now. So chapter 2 is really boring, that's why. When I reread it back, I thought I've got quite a bit of exposition here, which probably isn't right for chapter 1. Chapter 1 kind of needs to be the kind of hook to get the reader into the story. Let's have some crises happen. Something's got to go wrong. We've got to get our characters into the frame nice and fast. Boom, bang, 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 boom, boom. We've got to have some stuff happening to them with not too much kind of slow-paced stuff slowing it down. So what I did is that was chapter 2 originally. So what I've done is I've moved chapter 2 to chapter 1, chucked a few little bits into chapter 1 to kind of explain some of the stuff, and then when you get a chance to breathe, you get to the end of chapter 1 and you're going into chapter 2 and there's a different scene, now I've got the opportunity, okay, here's a little bit more about what the heck's going on with this technology, so you can kind of position yourself, because otherwise I thought it's too dull to start. So it's the things like that I've had to think myself. So Dune is Dune is an interesting example because it's in terms of certainly technology, it's very light on description. There's quite a lot of talking about sand and things because that's kind of more interesting. That's obviously where Frank Herbert's mind was. So that sort of thing. So description is important, but what you probably don't want to do is, if you're writing multiple paragraphs of description and there's no dialogue and the story isn't moving forward, nothing's happening now. This is just, by the way, the super duper warp drive thingamajig operates by using an antimatter containment system. If you're doing that for several paragraphs, you probably need to stop and have a think again, okay? Because most readers, particularly nowadays, and this is changing a little bit as well, they're just going to skip over it, or they're not going to pick your book up at all because they, oh god, this is boring. You need something to happen, and then description can happen in other bits and pieces. You need a certain amount of description to start off with, but if you can get that into a paragraph, just enough to get started. Okay, the spaceship rolled over, the viewport flickered with the light of exploding stars or something like that. Okay, we're in space, right? Fair enough, good. Right, there where we are. The anti-gravity field. Oh, there's anti-gravity, is there? Okay, so and somebody was flung across the bridge and smashes their head into a wall and breaks their neck. Okay, so they're in trouble. There is an anti-gravity and we're in a spaceship. All right, so that's probably enough. Okay, we're in a crisis moment. Let's find out what characters have we got here as Captain, so and so. You need a little bit of description to sort of set the scene, but you can get away with not too much. Okay, we can get back to what kind of spaceship is it? How does the warp drive work? How does the anti-grav work? Later, because you've already established that there's some stuff going on. All right, so that's quite good. In space drive, hyperspace manuals confirmed. All right, I'll just explain how the Heisenberg compensators work at the end. So that's for the appendix, Chris. We've already been talking about this. So Wintermute. So chapter one does happen, but it will be chapter 2. Okay, Wintermute. So don't worry. I haven't got rid of anything. I've just moved it around a little bit. Glenn says, Drew, what do you think of the technique of using a less informed character being the means to describe things to the reader, or is it a cheaper escape? No, I think that works quite well. I've done that a few times. It's quite useful in science fiction. If you have a character who, for sake of example, has never been on a spaceship before, that can be quite a useful way of giving the reader some impressions of what it's like to jump aboard a spaceship. What's that strange noise? What's that strange smell? Is it supposed to sound like that? You can go through their emotional reaction to what they're experiencing, and as the seat comes down and grabs them into place to stop. It's like there's a wonderful scene. I'm just trying to remember which film it is, when and I remember thinking that was a good piece of writing. I can't remember. It's a submarine warfare film, relatively recent one, a fairly modern one, where basically I think they've got some marine. No, not can't be Marines. Must be some army types or something, and they're basically taking aboard this. I think it's a World War II submarine, and basically they're these army types. They're big tough guys, and they're standing on the. Is it called a bridge? I don't know. What's the main control centre of a submarine called? I don't even know. Anyway, whatever that is it the bridge? I'm not sure. They're standing there with obviously the hardened submariners. Okay, it's the con. Right, there we go, Chris. Thank you very much. Okay, they're standing in the con, and this World War II submarine goes down, submerges. And as it goes down, there's a sort of crackling and crunching noise as the pressure is increasing around the sub, obviously, which really is. And then it starts to leak. Okay, there's water coming in, and the submariners are completely used to this, and you can see the kind of army guys looking around, thinking, none of them want to ask is it supposed to do that question? They're just. Because they're tough and they're hard and they're supposed to cope with everything, and they kind of, you can see them all looking at each other going, who's going to ask the question? No, I'm not asking the question. And the submariners are going, we're not going to say anything until they ask the question. You can kind of see this looks going between the submariners and the Navy, and nobody asks the question. There's just lots of eye movement. And stepping away from the stream of water, stuff like that, and it's brilliantly done. It's written in a sense. There's no words. There's no dialogue in this scene. It's just like 15 seconds of. It's really, really good. But I don't think it's Das Boot. No, it's a relatively modern thing. But it was. I just remember thinking that was good writing. Whoever did that, or good script direction or something like that, because it gets over the point. These guys are outside of their element, but they're tough guys. Okay, they can kill with anything. But is it supposed to do that? And I just remember thinking it's right. It's like Han Solo hitting the computer board that all comes back on. Okay, those sort of things, and that kind of stuff. If you use a character who's new to that situation to kind of react to that, I think that's a perfectly valid way of getting across the environment. Because if you can trigger the emotions, okay, this getting aboard this spaceship, this is scary. This is not how I expected it to work. Is this the food? All of those sorts of things. Mad Monk has gone and found every recent submarine film that there has been. Let me just have a listen. I don't know. I'm going to have to go look. I've got it downstairs. I just remember seeing it. It was particularly good. But I just remember that scene, thinking that was really, really well done. And you can then the ship. Or the crew, you have a little bit more kind of emotional resonance with them. I think, Glenn, you've kind of made the point there. The trick is making this uninformed character be relevant. Okay, they can't just be, I'm the stupid character, so I'm going to ask the stupid questions because I'm doing this on behalf of the reader. Okay, that begins to feel a bit contrived. And so don't do that. But if the story makes sense to have a character who is out of their depth in that scenario, I think that's perfectly valid. I mean, I've got an instance of that in my current story. Somebody basically ends up on a ship, and they are not used to space travel. They've never been on a spaceship before. They've never been off planet before, so the idea of going on a spaceship to them is like, why would I want to do that? And it happens accidentally to them as events in the story overtake them, and their first basically their first interaction with space is being violently ill, all right, because it's weightless for an awful lot of the time. So that sort of stuff. Okay, that's a perfectly valid way, and sprinkle the description in. And I think the other really good way to do it, being out of your depth, is normally in submarine stories. The other way to do it is to talk about it in dialogue. Okay, again, you need to be careful here. But you can have, let's say, your uninformed character talk to an informed character. That's perfectly reasonable. You can have informed characters reminiscing about how it used to be different sometime else. Okay, so you could have two informed characters aboard your spaceship going, do you remember before we had the inertia dampeners, we could never go above this level of thrust because otherwise we'd kill each other by splatting ourselves on the back wall. Oh yeah. It didn't always go right, did it? No. I lost a few of my crewmates back in those days. You can drop a little bit like that if it's natural. Okay, if it's natural, it's the sort of conversation that people would have. Well, back when I was young, we never had any of this fancy navigation technology. We had to do it by, plotting. Really, Granddad? You can have a natural conversation which brings out the age difference between characters as well. Those sort of things. Okay. What you do have to bear in mind that during the war, the old during the war, back in the day, when I were young, this was all wireframes. None of this fancy graphic stuff. Back in my day, everything was wireframe. 3D terminals, we only had 2 dimensions. So uphill both ways in the snow against the wind. So you could, but if you've got that sort of interaction in your crew, and I've got something of that in my story as well, because having an age gap actually with characters is a useful thing, because you can then develop that sort of mentor-mentee type thing. You can have the old guard trying to teach the young guard, how things are, but the young guard be able to teach the old guys some tricks, or just being faster, better, fitter, etc. All those kind of things. So those things are a way to get little bits of description in and little bits of backstory in. I wouldn't go to Alpha Centauri. Why not? Have you ever been to Alpha Centauri? No. Well, trust me, you don't want to go to Alpha Centauri. Okay, and that's basically giving you, the reader, what's going on at Alpha Centauri, right? So you can do things like that, but you don't want to labour the point. It's got to be a natural conversation. On this stream, we've done the Audi TT before. Okay, so particularly in science fiction, it's a tendency to over-describe the technology. Have I got the Audi TT? It's in here somewhere. We did this thing, didn't we? I don't know what I did with it. Hang on, let me see if I can find it. It's not the Audi TT. I think we called it. Here we go. This is it. We wrote this ages ago. Okay, so this is how not to write a science fiction novel, right? Okay, it's basically so I'm going to read this out because we wrote this collectively years ago. John pressed the coded ignition activation device and was rewarded with an audio confirmation from the motorised conveyance before him. He opened the door, slipped into the cushioned leather seats, and inserted the activation device into the requisite terminal. In a split second, electrons surged through carefully designed pathways. Fuel, honed by 100 years of expertise, was carefully funneled through exquisitely crafted pumps. Instrumentation eliminated, feeding just the bare essential information back to John based on the myriad different sensors, all attuned to optimum efficiency. Fires burned, mechanisms performed a stately dance to the thrum of power, restrained but ready to be unleashed. A roar of aggression surrounded the vehicle, leaving none nearby in any doubt as to its potency. Physics and chemistry combined with biology in the most elegant of symbiotic fusions as John popped down to the shops in his Audi TT. Okay. You don't need that at all, right? That's just wrong. Okay. You don't, if you're in a contemporary novel, you don't talk about how the car works, okay? So everybody knows how a car works. Well, actually, in fact, that's entirely wrong. Hardly anybody knows how a car works, all right? Nobody needs to know how a car works. No, most people don't care how a car works, right? It's a car. You get in it, you turn it on, you drive to the shops. You get your milk, you come home. Okay, that's what a car is for. Same with a toaster, same with a TV, same with a radio, same with an MP3 player. We all know what they do, right? Okay, it's a thing that does a thing. Spaceships would be the same in the future. Okay, we don't need to get into the spaceship and go, aha, okay, well, we need to activate the super duper duper quantum flux drive by priming the antimatter pumps and the fusion coefficient drive. We don't need to do that. People in the future will just get on spaceships like we get on a bus or a shuttle or a car. Okay, they won't feel the need to explain how it works because it's just a thing that they do. Okay, same with a laser pistol, same with a gun, same with a teleporter, same with the anti-grav, same with all of those things. The people who use them will be familiar with them, right? Okay, so they won't. It would be completely unnatural for them to explain it in dialogue. Right? Okay. Right. Everybody ready? We're going to just activate the. It just won't happen. You've got to sort of, if you're writing that, in the case of what I'm doing, I'm writing a sort of space opera with ships that can kind of move around. Okay, it's just white van man in space. Just get in the ship and go. Okay, just get us out of here now. How fast? As fast as it will go. I don't care. Okay, so bear in mind how the people in your environment, how familiar they would be with the technology that you're talking about. Yes, you have to get something across to the readers as to how it is and what it works and what it's capable of, but you don't need to go to the nth degree in description. You certainly don't want to reference that in conversation because your people will just suddenly sound like ridiculous because they just would not talk that way. Okay, it's a gun, okay? You can have a character. And I've done this with Shadewood. You probably know some of you might say, "Hang on a minute, Drew. Hang on a minute." You had a character that did that. I did have a character in Shadewood who was always trying to figure out how things worked. Okay, there was a character called Maru, who I get lots of grief about Maru. Okay, so Maru was always trying to. Well, how does that work then? What happens if we do this? And is it what makes it turn on? How's it powered? All this. And he was always asking those sort of questions, and basically, everybody else in the story basically told him to shut up. Okay, not now, Maru. It's always that. Right? But that was more a character thing. Okay, he was somebody who was interested in how does it work. Where did it come from? Is it busted? Is it supposed to do that? Okay, and everybody else was Maru. No, now is not the time. Crisis is happening now. We need you over here to get us out of this fix. Okay, how it works is not important. Okay, and that was a more character thing. He was very kind of a bit squirrel. Okay, that's funny thing. For his troubles, he got beaten. Seems fair to me. I've been accused of being overly harsh to Maru, and one of these days I'm going to sort out a spreadsheet and work out how many times Maru got injured compared to all the other people in the story. Because I don't think I've been unnecessarily harsh to Maru, but we'll find out. Curiosity beats Maru. So but that was a character thing. Okay, it was a character thing. You were supposed to get the idea that he was interested in technical stuff at all times, and he was that sort of guy. Okay, and that meant that in any particular situation it would be very easy to distract him from the crisis that was happening by some flashing lights going off in the corner, okay, to the annoyance of lots of the other characters who needed him to focus on the problem, because he was usually instrumental in solving the problem, but he wasn't all that dependable at keeping us focused. All right, and that was a tension that I added into the story. So those sort of things. So that's something you can do in those sort of things, but you've got to make it realistic. So a bit of description is fine. Too much description, if you're going into several paragraphs, you've almost certainly overdone it. Okay, you can use your characters to describe it a bit, but beware that you don't overdo it, because why would they be talking about how something works? Because they know, and so there's no need to have that conversation. You could be explaining it to a less experienced person. That kind of does work. but you need to make sure it doesn't come out as too contrived. If you imagine a TV show where it's like, oh, okay, I'm glad you've asked me that question because now I can explain it at great length. It just comes across as very twee, right? So it's like, oh, I'm glad you asked me that question because the readers and the watchers of this TV show now need to know how this works. It's like, yeah, that just feels contrived, and you don't want your story to come out as contrived. And Glenn's quite right. Why does the reader does the reader actually need to know this to understand what's going to happen next? If there's something fundamental in there, let's say every time you hyperspace, it fractures your DNA by 1%. Okay, that's probably a useful piece of information to know. Okay, because you clearly don't want to make too many hyperspace jumps, right? If there's something important like that in there that's crucial to your story, we can't do another jump. We've got to, if we do another jump, we're putting ourselves at risk of massive DNA damage. That's a stupid example, but you know what I mean. Okay, if there's something in the technical description that's important for the readers to they better not do another jump because otherwise the bad thing will happen. Yes, you need to get that in there. If it's just it folds space by compressing two quantum filaments and then doing some string theory in the 11th dimension, does it matter? Okay, does it matter? So if it's not necessary to push the story forward, you probably don't need to know. A Bacta tank is a good one. Okay, what's a Bacta tank? I don't know what a Bacta tank is. It's just a thing of fluid, but you put people in it, they get better. Okay, I completely get what a Bacta tank is, right? You don't need to jump in and explain it. Some stuff is fairly obvious. We can't jump back. Do you want to do? It doesn't have to be magic in your universe. If you in your world building have figured out exactly how something works, that's fine. You may not want to put that in your story. Okay, back to Tank to the Future. Oh, bad people. But if there's, like I say, if there's something like that, so for example, if the inertia dampeners, to take something from Star Trek, are important. Okay, so if the inertia dampeners fail, and your starship goes at full thrust, and your crew's all going to be dead because they're splattered against the bottom, that might be important to know. Okay, because if the ship is damaged, you could have a character talk to another character. Did you hear about the USS Splat? No. They went to warp and their inertia dampeners failed. Wasn't pretty. Okay, you could just leave it like that, right? It's like, okay. Now we know that inertia dampeners are really, really important. Okay, we don't need to know how they work because nobody really knows. But yeah. Make sure they're switched on before you press the accelerate button, okay? If there are things in your universe that are important like that, then the USS Splat. Sorry, yeah. Sensitivity training day for me. Slap. So if there's important things in your universe, the way things work can have an impact on the characters and the people, and you can chuck that sort of thing. So for example, if your ship is about to do its amazing escape routine through hyperspace or warp drive or through a worm or whatever it happens to be, and the thing that keeps them safe in that transit is suddenly busted, then that's an important piece of tension building. We haven't got, jump right through a star. Yeah, all that sort of stuff. We've got to plot the hyperspace route, otherwise we might end up in the star. Yeah, that's going to end the trip real quick, right? Warp drive. We can't go into warp with the impulse, with the inertia dampeners offline. We'll die, or whatever it happens to be. Okay. Plotting an unforeseen hyperspace jump, bounce too close to a supernova. All those kind of things. Okay. It's tension. It's good stuff. Okay. It's all made up nonsense, right? It's all made up. We all know that. But I wonder what happens if I press this button. The sign lights up. Winterby, you know this, okay? The sign lights up saying, please do not press this button again. That's what happens. you have to have a think about it. What's important to the reader to know? You know, does it inform the action that's about to happen, or does it explain why the crew are, panicking about a particular thing? So think about the description in there. So that's a bit of talk about the main description in your story. You do need some. Okay, you do need some. You need your reader to know where the heck you are, what the people are doing, and the sort of stuff that's around for them to interact with. So you can't, if you've got a scene and Maru picks up a vase and whacks Kiri over the head with it, where did the vase come from? Okay, you can't just grab an object that you haven't referenced before. Okay, so if you are in a stately room full of antique decorations, vases, artworks, paintings, tapestries, then it's fine. Maru grabbed a vase and smacked Kiri over the head with it. That works. You can't just grab a vase from nowhere. If you're in an engineering section of a spaceship, you could grab a hydro spanner or whatever it is and then whack somebody over the head with it as well. That makes sense, okay? If you're on the bridge, it doesn't really make sense. Why would there be a hydro spanner on the bridge? Okay? You might need to have something else. So if you are about to have a scene where the characters are interacting with some objects that are in the scene, you need to let the reader know that those objects are there in the first place. Okay, or at least you need to give them a picture that they could probably go, oh yeah, it makes sense that there would be a vase there, right? Or a hydro spanner, whatever it happens to be. You need to drop something in, okay, and a series of tools was lined up on the on the bulkhead. Okay, got it. There's some tools on the bulkhead. Somebody could grab a tool and whack somebody over the head with it. I don't know why I'm so obsessed with whacking people over the head, but anyway. You need to provide some cues. Okay, that if you're going to interact with the environment, are there levers? Are there screens? Are there display terminals? What's in this room where we are? Is it windows? Is it what is it? Are there joysticks? Are there controls? Is it push button? Is it voice activated? All those kind of things. So all that sort of stuff. So those things you kind of need to have in there, and you need to drip those in so that the reader knows what's going on. So that thinking about Maru, it's bringing up the violent side. I'm definitely doing worse things in my current set of novels than my current set of characters. Now that's a thing. Okay, so first thing is, where are your characters? Establish that. Okay, what does the setting look like? If it's a contemporary setting, that's probably easier. If it's a science fiction stroke fantasy setting, you are going to have to describe it a bit. Okay, don't do the other ghastly thing of over adjectiving things. Okay, so the glorious pastel sunlight with scintillating rays of red and green and gold, lighting up the clouds with a pastel. Stop. Okay, it's a sunset, right? You're not a poet. You're a writer. Okay. If you want to be a poet, that's an entirely different thing. I have no experience of being a poet. Okay. Don't over adjectivize things. Okay. You just don't need that much fluff in the story. Okay. We get it. It's a pretty sunset. We get it. It's dawn is happening. Okay. It's a nice swimming pool. She's a pretty girl. All of these things. Okay. That's fine. All right. Okay. But just don't go over the top. So there we go. Dear Harry89, hello there. Good. Regarding this, make sure to reference things in the scene. Do you have a technique to make sure you do this? Like doing a drawing of the scene after you wrote a draft it, or sit down and visualise it in detail or something? So I do visualise it. I don't tend to draw it because I can't draw for toffee, but I do. Okay, so if I've got a few items in the room that I need to use, I will make sure I make an inventory of what's in the room. So if there's a desk and a chair that's important to a scene, I'll make sure I reference the desk and the chair. Is there a window? I'll try and give the reader a very quick kind of, okay, it's a small room, it's dimly lit, there's a desk in the corner, there's a window, but it's very grubby, you can't see much out of it. That's probably enough. Okay. I'll have a mental note. I tend to visualize it in my head and then write down the necessary details, but only the bits that are important that help the scene. So I'm thinking of one scene where somebody is basically chucked onto a table and held down and restrained while they're kind of tortured a little bit. It's very violent this evening, sorry. And the table is important because without the table they can't be held down on the table. Okay, so you need a little bit of that sort of stuff. There's a wizard here, exits are north and west. And if you realise, you think, hang on, I need a red hot poker at this point in the story. It's being very violent. Okay, then there has to be you have to introduce the poker somewhere else. Okay, now I've made this mistake. Sometimes this goes wrong in continuity because you chop things around a little bit in your story and you break things and you don't introduce the item. I had that happen that one of my characters got in a boat and started rowing away, and then in the next scene they were walking around somewhere, and my wife said, she basically brought the manuscript back to me and said, "Where did the boat go?" And I was like, "What do you mean? Where did the boat go?" She said, "Well, he was in it here, and now he's not in it. Where's the boat?" And I was like, "Oh no, I've screwed up the continuity." Okay, so you have to have continuity of actions to an item. If an item exists, it can't just vanish, but it also has to be present prior to the character needing it. So that sort of stuff. We kind of need to. The other thing that I make a lot of mistakes at is, particularly I've noticed it in fantasy when I'm doing fantasy novels, is people putting away their weapons. Okay, so she places the knife back on the belt and fastens the buckle. He puts the sword back in its scabbard. And then about a paragraph later, he puts the sword back in his scabbard. And my wife is saying, "What's he doing with the sword in between putting it back in the scabbard?" It's like, okay, I need to rewrite that. So be careful. If he puts the cup on the table, he can't put the cup on the table again, okay, without picking the cup up first. So you have to go through and make sure the interactions with things in the environment also make sense. Stop fiddling with your sword, exactly. That has to make sense. The other thing the other thing to look at is when characters sit down and stand up. Okay, this is another thing that I get wrong quite a lot in my first draft. Is people sit down twice or they stand up twice, or they jump to their feet. And hang on a minute, he was already on his feet. What's he doing? Sort of jumping on the spot. Things like that. Okay, so your description not only does it have to be there to sort of show that the characters are doing something, but it also has to make sense in the context of hang on, but they were sitting down. They can't sit down again, etc., etc., etc. Okay, so people strapping themselves into the seats multiple times. Like, I can't move now. I've got so many straps across me. That's exactly it. That comes from overwriting a little bit. Okay, because you're trying to get things in. You have to then go back and read the entire scene and go, does that make sense? And quite often you'll get vanishing boats or disappearing hammers and people standing up twice and stuff like that. Okay, you just need to go and fix it. So that's the thing. Another one. Okay, so don't make it too long. Don't make it too boring. Because what you're kind of saying, if you're doing too much description, what you're basically telling your reader is you're not smart enough to get my story, so I'm going to tell you, which is kind of like it's not really a nice message to give the reader. What you'll probably find is most of us, myself included, over-describe to start with, and then we've got to edit it back to just the essentials. Okay, so you have to cut stuff out of your novel, which is pare it back, to the point where it's only got enough stuff in there for it to make sense. Don't fall in love with your own storytelling is the other part. You may think this detail about the thing that happened 3 decades before, it's really, really important and it's really exciting, and I spent a lot of time doing some world building on that thing. Does the reader need to know that right now? No, they don't. So cut it out. Maybe refer to it in the future. Maybe never refer to it at all. Okay, all those sort of things. Does it move the plot on? Does it move the story on right now? No, don't need it there. Put it in your not used document. Don't delete it. Don't just zap it, but put it in your not used file. Okay, because you might need it later on. Why do you do that? My grandfather had this habit of always doing this. I just do it as well. What? He just basically said ever since the War of '62, he always did this thing. I always do it. What thing? You can have that as the discussion later on. Okay. Don't do it early on. There was a war back in '62, and the XYZs fought the ABCs, and it was a long protracted war. It took 3 decades to resolve, and it has no relevance to today at all. Okay, right, cut. Put it somewhere else. Totally guilty. That says iconoclasm. Yeah, so we all do it. Okay, because it's part of developing the story. But if it's not helping that particular scene, and it doesn't. You can have a character internally musing about it for a bit. Okay. Yes. Well, my grandfather, of course, he fought in the War of '62. You can have that a bit if you're kind of monologuing somebody's internal dialogue, but don't do it too much because, again, it gives you a little bit of insight into what your character's doing, but you don't need too much of that. Okay, here's a person who keeps thinking about stuff in the past. Why does he do that? Jan, I think said I had to draw out an entire deck plan of a starship because when I wrote it, nothing made sense. Yeah, so that's kind of important. I've done some basic sketches of how the insides of my spaceships work, so I know which way around they're oriented, so that they don't go up to the bridge one day and then go up to the living quarters the next scene. It's like, how does this spaceship work? You have to have, it does have to be consistent. So if you are using a spaceship, it's probably sensible to have a little, a simple deck plan. Don't go into how many energy conduits are connecting all the decks and things like that. You probably don't need that. But a basic, this is where they sleep, this is where they eat, this is where they control the ship, this is where the engines are. Here's an access corridor that might be important later on where the alien gets aboard and tries eating them. Things like that. You may find. So to do that kind of stuff. So now the other thing that we all get wrong. Okay, I'm not as guilty as this of some people actually, because I've kind of I've pared back on this historically many times. But character description. Okay, character description. Now when we sit down, we invent our characters for our story, and we have great fun doing it. Okay, so. Here's the hero, here's the heroine, here's the antagonist, and the antagonist has got a wicked scar down the side of his face, and he's got a bit of a squint, and he wears a pointy hat, he's very tall and he's very strong, and but he's got a soft side as well. We spend a lot of time on character descriptions. Okay. And there's nothing wrong with that in the world building, because that helps us get what the characters like and how they're going to react. Okay, but again, don't dump too much of that into the story. We don't need to know whether they're 5'10" or 5'12", okay, or 6 foot rather. It's kind of irrelevant. Okay, he's pretty tall. Elvish fellow, pointy hat. Yeah. So here's an example I found on the internet actually of some too much description. Okay, I shook hands with a man. He had brown hair and brown eyes. He was 6 foot tall and skinny. He wore overalls and a brown suit. There were patches on his elbows and the knees. He also wore a hat with a hole in it. He had a mole beside his nose. His teeth were crooked. His sister stood beside him. She had red hair and blue eyes. She was at least 5'3" and plump. She wore a dress and an apron, but no hat. Her teeth were crooked. Okay, it's just way too much stuff. We don't need to know this. It's not helping us. Okay, who are these people? What are they doing there? You're slowing the story down by giving us too much. Okay. So by contrast, okay. Here's another one. Okay, so Pete, the guy introduced himself as Pete. He was dark and wiry, and his face had a quiet, watchful look about it until he smiled. Ooh, okay, kind of a bit more interesting. Okay, what's this guy? Where's he coming from? Okay, you need to be careful how much you use. If you just go right, here's a list of like a kind of Dungeons and Dragons character sheet. That's not the way to do it. All right. Okay, height, age, sex, preferred clothing, sword type, all that sort of stuff, charisma, hit points. Okay, that's not how you do description in a book. So, you basically, again, you want just enough to distinguish the character from the other characters. Okay, so an example of this in Shadewood, for example, and I got a lot of grief from this from a lot of quarters. So Kiri, the first time you meet Kiri, the only description you get is that she has greasy, dark black hair. And the expression dark black hair comes back quite a lot. And loads of people go, what do you mean dark black? I mean, black is dark anyway, okay? You can't say dark black. I say, well, I can, because I'm emphasising it. It's emphasis. Dark black hair and blue eyes, okay? And that's all they basically give you. Everything else about that character is attitude, from the way she speaks and the way she conducts herself. Okay, I describe nothing else about her at all. She has dark black hair and blue eyes. In terms of what else she looks like, she's quite skinny because she's undernourished. And as you're first introduced to her, she's sort of covered in dirt and probably quite smelly. So, that gives you enough. Okay, you don't need any more than that. She's an urchin. She lives in the wild. She's got questionable hygiene, and she has blue eyes and dark black hair. That's all you get. Okay, that's all you need. What else do you need to know about the girl? That tells you a lot about the environment she's in, and then distinguish her from anybody else. She's got quite a piercing glare. Okay, that's something that comes across fairly quickly in the story. So that sort of stuff is enough. I've tended to use. So hair is quite a good one. Okay, hair is quite a good one because you do tend to notice people's hair fairly early on. Okay. It's a fairly clear distinguishing thing. So if you've got long hair or a particular colour of hair, if you've got no hair, it's one of those things that you tend to, you're going to notice that. Okay, you're not going to notice that. I use the eyes in my description because eyes is, it's not something you generally, I mean, you probably can't see what colour my eyes are, okay, right now. My eyes are actually hazel, okay, just so you know, right? So hazel is a sort of greeny brown kind of colour, quite nondescript, my eyes. But you're probably not noticing that at the moment. Now that I've said what colour are Drew's eyes, you probably are noticing it. But okay, you don't generally make a note of people's eye colour in most day-to-day conversation. You probably can't remember the eye colour of the last stranger you interacted with, right? You probably don't notice. Okay, but when you're close to somebody, when it's a bit more intimate, okay, eye colour becomes quite important. So I tend to throw eye colour in as part of the description to indicate that either the POV is now very intimate with this character on a one-to-one basis, or something relationship-wise is happening between the two characters, i.e. that they're noticing that, oh, she really has got blue eyes, hasn't she? Okay, just noticed your hat pin, yeah. So in a scene where I think it's the first time Maru and Kiri actually interact at kind of point-blank range, he's suddenly conscious of her blue eyes, okay, because they're close together physically, and now this attraction is beginning to develop between them. They're noticing each other as people for the first time rather than just enemies. And I throw the eyes in because that basically, the idea being that you, the reader, get, oh, okay, so he's looking at her. He's really studying her closely now. He's noticed she's got blue eyes. Okay, so there's that sense of an intense gaze and a sense of making more of a note of the person that you're actually with. It's a bit more intimate, okay? You can go add more description as appropriate to the scene. I don't tend to remember the eye colour of people I interact with generally on a day-to-day basis at all because it's not important. I might notice their hair colour. I'm more likely to notice what they're wearing because that tells you about people as well, and that can be something you can throw into the description as well. But for God's sake, don't go through a list of characteristics that they are 5 foot tall, they're fat, they're thin, they're plump, they're whatever. Okay, and as a male writer, okay, don't fall into the ghastly trap of female measurements. All right, just don't go there. So much bad sci-fi, just bad male writing actually of let's just say chest measurements. Okay, that'll do. All right. Don't do that. Just don't do that. Okay. Stop. If you find yourself starting to talk about measurements, okay, you're wrong. Okay, you're now in the bad writing zone, and you need to back up. Okay, pull up. Okay, that's wrong. It's bad writing, and you don't need to do it. Okay. Chesty dumplings, exactly. Yeah, and so age can be important because you do tend to notice age. Okay, and I'm not trying to be ageist or sexist or anything like this. You do notice gender. Okay, you do notice gender. Okay, I will not talk to women the same as I will talk to men. We don't. Okay, we interact differently depending on who we're talking to. Same with age. Okay, and unfortunately, we will interact in terms of language and creed and perceived social economic things. All of those things we will react differently to because of our own prejudices and preconceptions. Maybe we shouldn't, but we do. Okay, and it's okay for you as the writer to write your characters to be suspicious or nervous or intimidated or in awe of other characters, right? Because that is a perfectly natural thing that we all do. Okay, so if one of your characters is young and naive and one of our characters is mature and old and extremely confident, it's perfectly natural for your young naive character to be going, I don't know what to do here. I'll do what you tell me. Okay, just I mean, you know what you're doing, right? And for your older character to go, oh God, here we go, not another newbie. Really, you're foisting this on me now? Do I have to cope with this? Can't I have somebody experienced to help me out? That's perfectly sensible character interaction. Okay. Your characters do not have to be paragons of social media and social political virtue. Okay, you're talking about people. Okay, people with flaws. Okay, if your character doesn't like men or doesn't like women, that's okay as a character because they can be flawed, right? You've got to be. You've got to be a bit careful that your character is a realistic character, and if they are, if they have got flaws, that those flaws are portrayed in an appropriate way, in the context of the story. But characters should have flaws. Okay, they should have issues. They should have people they don't like. Maybe they're just judgmental. Maybe they don't like people who are like this. That's a character trait. It's not right or it's wrong. It might be very wrong, in fact, but it's a genuine character. Okay, so you mustn't be scared of writing, characters that are have issues. Okay, but as Glenn says, avoid stereotypes. Okay, you don't want to just have the character that's the evil bad guy because he's the evil bad guy, right? Or the feisty princess girl who doesn't need any help from any man because she can do it just as well as the men. You don't want the cliches. You want characters that other people can relate to. Okay, this character is a bit indecisive and they haven't got the confidence that they ought to have, despite the fact they can clearly do the thing. They lack confidence. That's a perfectly normal thing to see. Or character that's overconfident and is clearly going to cock something up really, really quickly in the next couple of chapters. Okay, that's perfectly normal as well. Or the person who has been abused and has had so many negative experiences that tainted her perception of everybody, and she won't trust anybody. It's a realistic scenario. Okay, you can use that in your writing. That's perfectly acceptable to have. And then you've got the opportunity for character development. Maybe they meet somebody who changes their perspective on stuff, and they can do things. Okay, so you can do kind of things like that. That's important. So all those things are things that you can use. So don't be afraid of having, different genders, different colours, different hairs, different attitudes, different outlooks. If you want to throw in a mix of all those kind of things in, then throw them in if they're useful for your character development. But don't just chuck them in as a list of, right, they were left wing, they were 5'10", the 36 size chest. Don't do it like that. You can have you can make characters have an offhand remark. Oh God, she's off on one again. Just do that, and then you get the impression, oh, she's done this before. Okay, so she clearly goes into this rant about something quite often. That's a way of getting that sort of stuff across. Or if dare we say it, a well-endowed lady comes through the corridor of your spaceship, you can have your two. They did this in Firefly brilliantly with the I'll be in my bunk. Okay, we all know what that means. Don't need to spell it out, right? But we all get it, all right? And that's a good bit of writing. Okay, it portrays. Everyone understands what that's basically pointing out. We don't need to specify any more about it. So dialogue can be an extremely powerful way of she talks a lot, doesn't she? Yeah. It's like that guy. I mean, he never says anything. I mean, do you guys trust him? Those kind of things. You can chuck that into the dialogue so that your characters kind of, well, I wouldn't. Let's put it this way: I wouldn't stay in the same room as him. Let's say I had a knife or something like that. You can use bits of dialogue like that to give you, the reader, the kind of feeling of the other characters have towards the extra character. So all those sort of things are useful little techniques, but don't break it down to just a list of specific things. In your world building document, absolutely work out a character stat sheet and then refer to it to make sure you're using it consistently, but don't list those sort of attributes in a novel. So all those sort of things are important. Clothes, I think, can be important. How people dress, because you can get an idea of maybe how much money they've got, or depending on the scenario, what their kind of role is. So if they're if they got a long grey beard, a pointy hat, and lots of robes and some stars all over it, and a big magic wand, you're kind of getting a vibe, okay, from that sort of description as to what that character is probably going to be doing. Okay, if they have a big sword, lots of heavy armour, and they're stomping around, generally bad-tempered, again, okay, the kind of character that they're doing. If again, special mark like they've got a scar on their face or a tattoo or something, if it helps differentiate the character, I don't see any problem with it. But it's got to mean something somewhere along the line. Otherwise, why would you mention it? Okay, is the scar important? Is the tattoo important? What does it mean? Does it have any significance? Etc. I think those are the sort of things that I would tend to emphasise on. You need to spread it thinly. Think of description really as if you're making a nice casserole. Okay, let's go back to a cooking analogy. You're making a nice casserole, so you chuck in let's assume it's a meat casserole. Or you can have a vegetarian one. Doesn't really matter. You've got your base. Your sort of your peppers, your tomatoes. Your onions and stuff, and obviously you probably want some mince in there, and so on and so forth, and then maybe a bit of cream or a bit of cheese, kind of to flesh it out. Your description is more like the garnish, okay, that goes on. So a few bit of herbs and spices in there, maybe some rosemary or something, just to lift it up a little bit and to kind of to pad it out. Good description is like a garnish, right? I'm getting hungry just DJ's going. It just lifts it. It lifts the dish, and puts it in. So don't overdo it. If you cook something and you just like, let's have loads of salt and loads of Chinese 5 spice or I don't know, what other spices have we got? Loads of coriander. Loads of coriander. Let's just lack a load of that in. And peppers. Yeah, let's have. Yeah, it's just going to overload it. Okay, it's just going to overload it, and all you're going to get is kind of like an enormous mazba of like, this is way too done. Good description is like herbs and spices. Okay, it adds something to the meal, but you still enjoy what you're getting. Okay, it's not overwhelming it. So that's kind of how I sort of view description. Do not eat Drew's cookie? How do other authors do? I mean, we've talked about Mr. Herbert. Now he's quite light on description. If we take somebody like good old Tolkien here, a lot of the time Tolkien's all right, okay, but every so often he will jump into massive great paragraphs of stuff. Okay, here's a sign. This is a relatively early on in the story here. Okay, so I'll pick this one at random. This is at the sign of the prancing pony here. Okay, so I'm just counting how many lines of description. Okay, so Pippin and the crew have they've just got to the pub basically, and then before anything actually next happens, i.e., in fact, so the next important thing that happens is Frodo notices this guy in the corner who turns out to be Aragorn. He's known as Strider at this point. Okay. Now, in fact, in the book, 2 pages of description have gone by. Okay, before we get to that. Okay, and there's things about the dialect. There's a whole list of different types of Shire folk who it's loads of stuff. There's a description about there's a fire there, which is probably okay, and then a bit of the geography, a bit more about the dialect. There's a bit more about some people who are kind of hanging around, and then a bit more about some singing and the collapse of a roof, and then about some people who are talking about things that used to happen in the Shire ages and ages ago, and it's like nothing is happening. What's happening in the story? And eventually, who's that? Says Frodo, and that's like 2.5 pages later. It's too much. Okay, now, far be it from me to critique Tolkien, because that would probably be really, really bad. But the point stands. Okay, if you're just dumping a whole bunch of information, I mean, I don't know about you, but I don't need to know all the surnames of all the hobbits that have ever been in order to get the fact that we're in a pub and there's this stranger looking at us from across the room. Okay, it's kind of irrelevant information. All right, and so Tolkien does that a lot. I mean, there are scenes in Tolkien where you're kind of scratching your head as though, why is this even here? The whole bit with who's the funny guy halfway through that rescues the hobbits from the Barrow Downs, that bit. And Tom Bombadil, there we go. That whole section is like, really, what's going on there? That's arguably that's not actually pointing a finger at description, but it's kind of pointing an image at it's like, does that really need to be there? Compare and contrast again with Arthur C. Clarke. So here's my favourite Arthur C. Clarke novel, Rendezvous with Rama. Now Clarke, his descriptions are quite lightweight. Okay, but what Clarke does is he doesn't so much describe things as he sort of narrates. Okay, so he does do quite a lot of dialogue-driven story, but he's mostly narrating it. Okay. So his is a very laid back type of storytelling. And I'm looking at here chapter 5, and there's no dialogue at all in here, but it isn't. Some of it is description, but it's mostly introspection from the characters. Okay, and kind of third person narration of things. To kind of move the story on. So it's a situational thing rather than it is a dialogue sort of stuff. And then the dialogue picks up towards the end. So very different styles of writing. And it's not to say whether any of those are good or bad. They're just different, and everybody's writing is different. Um, and Yeah. So and what I'm saying here is current is kind of current thinking, and this changes all the time as to how much description is good and how much description is bad. The current vogue is for less. Okay. And certainly if you read contemporary literature that's quite old. I mean, Tolkien is what, 1940s? We talked about Frank Herbert, who's 1960s, and Arthur C. Clarke's Rendezvous with Rama is probably 80s, 70s maybe? 70s, there we go. It's, dare I say, it's quite old now. Contemporary stuff, you'll notice, is gets to the point a lot more quicker. What was that? A lot more quickly. And that's more a stylistic thing today. It's to kind of cut to the chase a little bit more. And that may flip around. Now, that doesn't mean that you can't write long, flowery descriptions, okay? You, as the writer, it's your choice, okay? But you'll probably find if you want to get your book published by a mainstream publisher, you're going to have to follow current editorial guidelines. You need to be aware of that. If you're going to self-publish it, you can do pretty much what the hell you like. But readerships ebb and flow as well. If people go, oh, this book was just so boring, I couldn't get into it, because all it is describing how the warp drive works for the first 3 chapters, that may not be the review you're after, right? So, again, it depends on what you're writing. Some people absolutely adore heavy-duty hard sci-fi novels with lots of technical description. Maybe that's the audience you're aiming for, right? Other people may know, I just want I want a nice, lightweight, pacey space opera where we cut to the chase and there's spills and thrills. They don't want that kind of thing. So it's going to depend a bit on your audience as well. And you've kind of got to find your way between all of those kind of things. And it is interesting going back and reading things again. So I must admit, I read The Fellowship of the Ring probably every 5 years, maybe every 10 years. Just because it's one of those things like, I haven't read that for a while, let's go read it again. And each time it's slightly different when you read it, because the more you learn about writing, the more you can critique other work. And sometimes you come across things and go, really? Why is that there? Why has he done that? But it is a different standard as well. Okay, you're critiquing a writer from decades and decades ago, sometimes over a century ago, depending on what you're reading. So all that sort of stuff is stuff that is subject to change and style over time. Okay, it doesn't mean it's right or wrong. It just means it's not now and it was then, and that's true for all sorts of things. First time chat from Dave Doge. Hey, I was reading your bio. Are you the guy that wrote that Lords of Midnight novel in the big box beyond cover? No, that's not me. No, I didn't write the original stuff. That was Mike Singleton himself. So not only did for Lords of Midnight, he wrote the computer game, and he also wrote the original novellas. He did both back in 1984. What I've done is I've written the full-length novel adaptation of those games, both Lords of Midnight and Doom Dark's Revenge, based on Mike Singleton's work. But no, I'm not Mike Singleton. Alas, Mike Singleton, I'm afraid, has passed away. He died back in 2012 of cancer, unfortunately. Very sad. So he's no longer with us, which is a bit of a shame. But we have kind of tried to pay homage to his style of writing in the books that we wrote. So there we go. I hope that explains that one. So decide what your audience is after, and then be true to that audience. Okay, if you're aiming for a thing, and that's another thing. I mean, JR, you'll have this as you start writing more books. Your readers will tend to keep expecting the same style of work from you, and you've got a choice as to whether you oblige with that or whether you try and do something entirely and utterly different, which might sometimes it upsets your readers because, well, I want more of what you did before, I want more of that sort of thing, and if you do something completely different, you can have different sets of readers, and they might not necessarily cross over too much. So things like that, depending on what your plans are and what your ambition is in terms of your writing as well. Your style may evolve over time, but in general, with description, not too much, not too little. Don't emphasise the character stats in a big long list. Okay, don't do that. That's very bad. Don't over describe physical attributes. All right, don't do that. Very, very tempting. Don't do that. And use it sparingly. I would recommend. You can always add a bit more in, and to be honest, when you first do a draft, you're probably going to overdo it. That's probably okay in a first draft, but then pare it back. What does the reader actually need to know here? What does the reader actually need to know? Is any of this ever going to be useful to them? If not, it doesn't need to be there. Just get rid of it, because just cut it out. Make it lean and sharp and pacey. That's always good advice. And I think that's all I've got to say on the subject. So there we go. So let's just catch up with the chat. Trader Bagel. I struggled with Revelation Space by Alistair Reynolds. I felt there was more focus on describing the tech than the characters, which was sadly incredibly uninteresting. As much as I love technology and description, you do need to. It depends. It does depend. I mean, one of my favourite books is this one, Arthur C. Clarke's Rendezvous with Rammer. Okay. Now the characterisation in this is poor, to be honest. All the characters are much of a muchness. And even now I couldn't remember their names, because they don't really matter. They're just a vehicle through which the exploration of this amazing spaceship is done. But I love that story. Okay, it's a great story. Normally, however, I like my characters to be interesting characters. So Star Wars. I can remember Luke Skywalker, Princess Leia, Han Solo, Chewbacca, R2-D2, C-3PO, Darth Vader, Obi-Wan Kenobi. They're memorable characters, right? Okay, and they stay with you. Whereas I can't name a single character in this book, because it doesn't matter what they're called. They don't really matter. Lord of the Rings, Bilbo, Gandalf, Aragorn, Legolas. I can remember the characters because the characters are important. Okay, it depends on the type of story. But it doesn't mean that the story isn't good, but it may be less accessible and less fun to read. A friend gave me Alistair Reynolds' book to read. I haven't read that much of his stuff. I did quite enjoy it. I mean, I thought it was okay. I'm currently reading, actually at the moment, I haven't got it in front of me, it must be in my room. I'm currently reading the old... not the Sword of Shannara. It's Terry Brooks. Terry Brooks novels, the Magic Kingdom of Landover for sale sold novels. Because I recently discovered them back again on eBay. I thought, I nabbed them. They were about £2 each for like a book, and so I nabbed them. I last read those as a teenager, so it's been quite good fun to revisit those, because they're not bad actually, but there's an awful lot of rambling description in them. Again, and it's like, oh really, come on, just cut back to the story. And so there's too much description, and that needs a good edit as well. But good fun stories, but a lot of description in there, which slows the pace of the story down quite a lot. So it's interesting to go back and revisit some of the stuff you read before, actually, with a slightly more focused eye, because you can sort of go, oh, okay, interesting. Rendezvous Ramble. One thing I did not care for was the characters. No, I mean the characters are irrelevant. They're meaningless. They don't add anything to the story. They're just a mechanism for exploring this amazing spaceship. And it depends what the writer was aiming for, I suppose. Arthur C. Clarke, for example, has hardly ever done any major characterization of his people. They're just mechanisms for getting the story told. Whereas I must admit, for example, Anne McCaffrey, who I'm much more inspired by in terms of my storytelling, I can remember thinking, the characters in there. So I'm thinking of Lesser and Flar and Fëanor and Remora and all those other characters that are kind of significant in those stories. Really, really strong mental image of what those characters are like, which is good. If the characters stay with you after you've read the story, I think you've done your job. So kind of all good stuff. So it's interesting sometimes to go back and read things that you've read before with older eyes and a wiser head, well, hopefully a wiser head, and kind of see what you make of it. And you can critique; it's perfectly reasonable to critique, because nothing's perfect, right? And fun to go and have a look through all those things. So there we are, my friends. Right, I shall love you and leave you. I've got to get up early tomorrow morning, so I'm gonna cry off a little bit earlier this evening. But I hope you found that interesting as a little chat through this garnish that we must sprinkle across our works. This description. Okay, set the scene, but don't overdo it. Hope you have a good one. Look after yourselves over the rest of the week. Back on Thursday, back on Friday, back on Saturday as per normal. So have a good one. Be good. Look after each other. And if I can't remember a character while reading a book, that's a bad sign. It is a bad sign if it's that kind of book. So there we go. So hopefully it's given you a few insights into that process. So be good. Take care of yourselves. See you soon. And as always, right on. Take care, my friends, and I will see you along. Be good.